So we are going to start with the criticism of communism and the various ways in which. So let's start with Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is basically, if you understand, apart from being a linguist, Chomsky is, in a political philosophy, what is he? Like in my political philosophy, I see myself as a social constructivist. Not less, whatever. It's a social constructivism is a different kind of philosophy in which you believe that people are more important and they have identities and interests. So, coming to Chomsky, what is his political leaning? So, he's a libertarian anarchist. He believes that he doesn't believe in a state led socialism, right? So, what was his criticism? So, this is what he says, that there isn't any part of physics which is called as Einsteinianism. You know, yes, Einstein discovered paradigms, but there's no field with the ism in it, right? The politics of ism. It doesn't make sense, he says. It doesn't make sense to me because people aren't gods. They discover things and they make mistakes and they graduate students, like the students, graduate students in the sense that you say, you'll tell me that, ma'am, you have done something wrong. So in the way that when people discover something, they make mistakes, their graduate students tell them that, look, you're wrong over here, and they go on to find better things next time. But they're no gods in the sense that there's no idea that you cannot falsify them, right? So he's saying, so you can see that there's a scientific bent of critique, right? So he says that, I mean, scientists do use terms like Newtonianism and Darwinism, but no one thinks of them as doctrines that you have to be loyal to. Understand, in Marxism, when you are a Marxist, you have to be completely loyal to that doctrine and you can't think about anything else, right? So Chomsky is very uncomfortable with this, that why do you have to be loyal? Why, you can make mistakes, you can learn, you can go ahead and find another doctrine or be loyal to some other, not loyal, but you can just admire or just believe, or at least figure out and embrace the criticism, right? But you don't have to be loyal to the extent that you are not going to take any criticism, right? So this is something which was uncomfortable, that you have something like Marxism, which you see as a doctrine that you have to be loyal to because you're a Marxist, and then you use so you don't want it to be anachronistic, you want it to have some kind of value in every time and space. So okay, what would be the critique of capitalism now? What would Marx say now? What would he say in 20th century? What would he say in 21st century? That sort of thing is completely alien to rational existence, and it only shows up in irrational domains. So basically, Chomsky has a problem with the entire loyalty that Marxism causes. Then he also says that, I do think that Marx was a very good journalist, and he had some interesting work that he had done, and he was a very good journalist, and he gave complicated theories, right? So Chomsky has read what he wrote about British in India. So if you want to, for example, Marx had tried to figure out if India could be, a similar case like Italy or Ireland. He was trying to find a European example for India, and he was always calling it as Hindustan. So Chomsky has read things which Marx has written as a journalist, like, about the British rule in India, about the Paris Commune, or parts of the capital that talk about industrial London and what was happening in Manchester. That is interesting. That is explaining about capitalism. But what he's trying to then, Chomsky is saying that I think later scholarship has improved it and changed it. Over the period of time, you have new trends like, different kinds of Marxist humanist, and neo-Marxist. And it's interesting, but the entire idea of this doctrination, which you have to be loyal with, is something I really agree with. He also says that Marx's idea of capitalism is a very abstract model, and it is not really intended to be very accurate in detail. For example, in the last class, we had this idea of surplus value, and we debated about it. So Chomsky will say that it is just an idea. Why do we have to, why does it need to be 100% accurate? Right? So by this kind of following? Why this kind of massive, loyalty of becoming a Marxist in that sense? So Chomsky is basically, questioning that. Now coming to what is the other critique. So that was the first critique, right? We'll do 5, 6 critiques, and then we'll do our own critique that we understood in the period of time. Then the second is Foucault, Michel Foucault. So when I was in MPhil, I used to read about and call him Foucault. So it's Foucault, and he started as a student of Marxism. Foucault came from a very rich family background, and he was very uh, protective because he didn't want people to know that he came from such a privileged background. He was a student of Louis Althusser, and even though he left the Communist Party and he left being a Marxist because of many things, which we'll study, but the point which I'm trying to say is that Foucault always defended Althusser till the end, even though Foucault eventually left the Communist Party. So Foucault was born in France. What happened is that he came from a very privileged society, but he had this very strong tendency of self-harming himself. When he was taken to a psychiatrist, and it was figured out what is the reason that, why is he so depressed and so much into self-harm. And his father wanted him to be a doctor. He would never become a doctor. He'll become a diplomat, so, and then an academic. But what happened is that he was not able to. So Foucault was gay, and at that point of time in France, even though France is very open with all these different sexual orientations, because of the family that he came and the questioning and the surveillance that he has to follow this entire baggage of the rules and restrictions and his sexuality and the ideas of masochism, he was not able to get any catharsis out of that. So Foucault was basically depressed, and he used to do a lot of self-harming things in that realm. Now, what started happening is that many scholars think of Foucault as postmodern, but Foucault himself says that he doesn't believe in this kind of division of modern, postmodern, postmodern. So postmoderns are basically in short form called as POMO. But he is called as it, but he doesn't believe that he is. So what was his life story? His life story is as simple as this, that Foucault basically started looking at history, started looking at mental institutions, started looking at states, started looking at schools, violence in a very different way. He started seeing that in the historical terms, when there was so-called more barbarism, there was more honesty and truth, and it was better than today when there is more of civilization and civility, but internally it is much more ruthless and negative. So he gave 2 examples. I told you that Frantz Fanon, the black philosopher who was a part of the Algerian independence movement, who was born in the Martinique Islands. Frantz Fanon was because who wrote Wretched of the Skin and Black Skin, White Mask. He basically gave the entire idea that in mental institutions, what used to happen, that you used to get electric shocks and very difficult violent treatments to cure you from your madness, right? So because he himself had gone through all of that because of his sexuality and the homophobia that he suffered and everything, one of the reasons why he left the Communist Party, because of the anti-Semitism and homophobia, and he was like not and the kind of bureaucracy and the kind of corruption that was found in the ranks of the communist officials and the party members, and this is why he left it. But what is anti-Semitism? You have to Google. What is homophobia? You have to Google. So the point which I'm trying to say is that what happened with him is that he went to the very, so Frantz Fanon, if you see, is opposite. He said that in mental institutions you should have much more of civility. You should not give electric shocks. You should not torture people who are mentally incapable of taking the right decisions. Instead, you should have counseling and therapy and all of that. That was what Frantz Fanon basically started. But Foucault was that Pico would have said that behind this entire facade of counseling and not giving electric shocks and not giving medicine and not giving and giving medicines and all of that, in the modern world, what has happened is that mental illness is an illness. Like if there is some kind of trait in you which is mentally wrong, which is not the normal in society, then instead of seeing you as different, the modern society is trying to control you, and to control you through medicines, control you propaganda, control you through counseling and everything else, which is worse because in the barbaric times of old ancient history, what used to happen that if you were mad or if you were supposedly, like, not in a very simplistic way, I don't want to use the term mad, but I'm not able to think of anything better. So if there was something which was different in you, you were treated as different instead of someone who needs to be cured or treated. You understand? So when you go to a counselor, when you go for your therapy sessions, you're giving medicines or you're talking or your catharsis takes place with the idea that you need to be cured, right? So this entire idea that why should we be ashamed of any kind of mental illness, because when you have any kind of physiological illness, like you're sick or you have any kind of physiological issue, you, it is not a judgment call, right? But so there is this very strong about mental health. So what Foucault is saying that what mental health and all this, what he would have said is that what mental health and everything would is doing is that it is just trying to cure you. Why can't you just be the way it is? Why does the society need to cure you through their mental institutions and through their counselings and medicines? Why can't you be treated just as different? Right? That is the first thing. The second thing, he also says that so he's basically more nostalgic of the past. Like he believes the modern world has failed us. So he says that during the time, when then he talks about jails. So he's talking about institutions. Like one institution is your hospital, medical, mental institution, and all of that. The other institution that he talks about is jails. So when you commit any crime and you are caught and you're in the jail, you're in jail for 5, 10, whatever, for your life. It is making you complacent. Jails make you complacent. Like, the entire idea that I don't want to have a life outside of jail. I want to again commit some kind of crime and get back, because the lifestyle in jail is much more egalitarian in that respect, and you're taken care of by the state. Till the time you're not in Nazi Germany that you'll be killed, but you're taken care of by the state in the jail. So you understand that in, like, basically in as a form of punishment, when you're jailed, you serve your sentence, get out, and that is it. So you have, the jail is normalizing you, and it is a certain kind of institution which is creating its own hierarchy, and it is treating you in that particular context, that how you should be docile and submissive. But before, what used to happen that when people were violently killed, that their throat is cut off or guillotined, and they are put as a mark of dishonor, and the body is lying for 3-4 days, and uh, they are punished by death, which is very torturous. Their death becomes an inspiration for other revolutions. That death becomes an inspiration. So when someone dies and he's treated so violently when he's killed, what happens is that the way he's dead, killed, and his body after his death, because Foucault has written a lot about your biopolitics, the politics of your body, body politics, sorry. So what happens is that it leads to a lot of revolutions. Say, for example, in the Arab uprising on 16th or 18th of December 2010, there was this Tunisian vendor who just self-immolated himself, and it is a sin in Islam. The moment he putting himself on fire, his entire body on fire, became the reason why the Arab uprising took place, and it had galvanized across countries. And there were dictators of 30, 40 years who had to resign. Eventually, it failed. But what I'm trying to say, that was the power of his body being set on fire. So that causes revolution, that causes structural change. You being punished in a jail and being made docile and being made to accept the entire structure of society in whichever world, first, second, third world you are. So that is actually making you much more docile. So he is actually saying that in the past it was better, right? Though a lot of people have criticized him, saying that he has not understood history very well, or he is making his own points, he's giving a different kind of revision of history. uh, he's not being because he talked a lot about power and knowledge. But what changed the life of Michel Foucault was reading Nietzsche. And Nietzsche basically said that history is not something which is dead, in the sense that history of ideas are also there, right? History is not something which is a set pattern that you have to only accept it. History can also be an idea that you can you know think about. You can touch that idea, you can think about it, you can visualize it, you can debate about it. That is what you can do. You can't have history only as a very like this beautiful bottle of mine that cannot be touched because it is very expensive. Oh, and the moment you'll touch it from a different time and space, you're going to make it dirty or whatever. The point which Foucault basically said was he's against the power domination of institutions. Now that we have understood it, what was Foucault's critique of uh, Marxism? He left Communist Party, so that was a, a step which was taken because of the treatment that he got, uh, homophobia and everything, which I have told you that before in the previous lectures also, when I was using the word the pronoun they, I said that the gender binary is being followed here, right? That's why I made the addition of they. So imagine that philosophers like Foucault, how would have they felt? Is Marxism different for them then, if they have a different sexual orientation? And why do we need to have so much of, why is sexual orientation, why do you have to normalize sexual orientation on the basis of your gender? Like recently, I came to know about this term, which is gay transgender or a non binary transgender. And it made me think that we in India live in such close compartmentalized gender relations in which our sexuality is so, like closely under surveillance and it's not fluid. So, what is the problem if it is fluid? Why do we have put it into these neat, clean compartments of identities, of boxes, right? So he was traumatized a lot, and he wrote about it. Eventually, he died of AIDS in 1984 in San Francisco. But Foucault wrote a lot of things. He wrote a lot about knowledge and power, his criticism of Marxism. So now you cannot understand if you just say the quotation that power is everywhere and comes from everywhere. You will not understand his context of criticism of Marxism. But now that we understand how he thinks at modern institutions, he says that power is everywhere. You know, the moment you start having resistance, you realize that there is power. But the point which he is making is that. But power is also not only in the state, it is in the it's in jail, it's in mental institutions, it's in hospitals, it's in schools. You are often paternalized by your teachers, infantilized in that sense, right? There is I am very dictatorial, right? No, what I'm trying to say is that power is not something which is only limited to the state. So his question was that if a proletariat of the state is going to solve all the power relations hierarchy in society, thinking that once you overtake the state, all the power relations will be equalized. That you think that the state is most powerful. No, there are so many other kinds of power relations, right? So, why are you only hell bent on dictatorship of the proletariat will be the state in socialism, and eventually in communism, you won't have it? But what about the other institutes where you have power relations? So in that you also have to understand this concept of Althusser, which he gave his own uh, mentor, was the concept of interpolation. Interpolation is that for example, if you're walking on the road, and I suddenly look at you and I say that, oh, wait, I call your name and you look back, right? It's a very simple thing. You're walking on the road or you're just in your college in a normal condition without pandemic, and you just shout at your friend, and your friend, you call your name, his or her name or their name, and they look back at you. Very normal. There's something that has happened that you call the name and they look back, right? They have grown with this interior internalizing of that this is my name, this is who is being called, and all of that, right? So interpellation basically talks about this conditioning that you go through, that you're not born a woman, you become one. A very famous quote, not given by Althusser. You have to figure out who gave the quote. The idea of interpellation is that you are taught how to be in every aspect. Like I keep telling you that none of the ideas that you have original ideas, you have picked it up from somewhere. In the same way, as a woman how you should be, as a man how you should be. So for example, what started happening in the Second World War, after America, after the Second World War in US, what started happening is that a lot of women during the time of the Second World War started working because their husbands were in the war torn, regions, and they were involved in the Second World War. So they wanted to earn money and to continue with the household, and there was so much of poverty. So a lot of American women started working out. So being a nurse or a tailor, whatever. When the Second World War was over, what happened was there was this context of that, okay, we can't have working women. It disturbs the power hierarchy. Women have to go back to the role as homemakers. So what happened? There was a massive advertising propaganda which was done. You will see it in US, but a lot in US, also in UK, that a lot of advertising or media or cinema or all of them started putting again women in the domestic roles, telling you that a good woman is the one who is able to take care of the family. That was an example of conditioning, and that was the example of interpellation, which Althusser is also talking about, because he talks about these the ideological apparatus of the institutions, right? So Foucault has been a victim of it. So Foucault doesn't believe that it is only the state which is going to victimize you. There are these institutions of power also, and Marxism doesn't talk about them. Simple. That is the critique which Foucault says. Um, the third critique is by Murray Rothbard. He was an American economist, and he has a very simple critique. He basically said that he gave just the inverse relation. It was like Marxism is that um, your socio-economic relations, your material reality makes you. That is what the basic idea of Marxism is. But you see, American economists, so by having a very capitalistic bent of mind. So in the critique of it, in a capitalistic critique of Marxism, he said that no, he believes that human consciousness is much more powerful than any other kind of socio-economic relation in the society. And human beings have the power to determine development of technology and the social relations that they want to pursue. So he is very clear on that. So it's a very capitalistic way of looking at it and inverting the socio-economic, saying that human consciousness is more important, and humans have the power to make changes. And you can't control what is happening outside of you, but you can always control what is happening inside of you. That kind of thought. So this is his capitalistic interpretation of Marxism. Now, here is my favorite, Karl Popper. He was an Austrian born British philosopher, and I told you about this in terms of Hegel also, that he had criticized Hegel. Because Karl Popper, for students who are pursuing research, Karl Popper is famous because he gave this entire idea that your hypothesis can be falsified. The idea that, your hypothesis cannot be falsified, which makes your research bad, I'm giving in a very simplistic way. कि आपका जो hypothesis है वो गलत हो जाएगा तो research क्या किया, right? What research did you do if your hypothesis is wrong, proved wrong? So your research should eventually be done in such a way that your hypothesis should be validated, your assumption should be validated. So Karl Popper was like, no, even if you have a scientific kind of study, which is qualitative research or quantitative research, if you do this scientifically, if you think about knowledge scientifically, आप किसी चीज में research करते हैं, you start doing some kind of research, and eventually you come to know that no, your hypothesis has been falsified. It does not mean, it does not mean that your research was unscientific. In fact, it means that your research was scientific enough to understand that it has been falsified. Right. So you can understand that Karl Popper was someone who is black and white, you know, like give me in categories, like things in them. Just tell me what it is. Don't give me that, okay, this is this also, and this also, and this also. Right. So he had the same kind of criticism of dialectics during the time of Hegel, that how can you, what is this thesis, antithesis, synthesis in a single object? This is a bottle, it is not a glass. Simple as that. How can you have this kind of, you know, so many other patterns of evolution in objects also? So he said that the concept of historical method as well as the unfalsifiable and pseudoscience is one of the paramount critiques of Marxism. He didn't agree with the idea of historical materialism and dialectical materialism, in short. He said it was pseudoscience. Because imagine if you're giving some idea of socialism or capitalism, socialism or communism coming later in the evolution, what is your scientific basis of making that assumption? If that is, because eventually all said and done, it is a hypothesis by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. How do you make hypothesis needs to be scientific too? So how will we ever come to, can we ever falsify it? When in 1883, when Marx dies, and in 2020, in both the cases, the idea that, okay, these are the stages of historical modes of production and the evolution is the same. But will you ever come to a point in history and say that, no, it was wrong, because capitalism is still going on? So Marxists will say that there will be socialism when capital, after late capitalism, maybe. But how do you scientifically prove it? Right? So this was the criticism of Karl Popper. The last criticism by a famous philosopher, these were famous philosophers giving criticism, then we'll go into our own rationality, what we did in the class and figured out. Francis Fukuyama wrote this book in 1992 called as The End of History and the Last Man. So it was written after the collapse of the Soviet Union and giving a very simple set fact that now it is only, you know, the Cold War is over, America is a superpower, our liberal democracy and free market capitalism is the model code of conduct, and this is where history has ended, taking away from the Marxist idea that, you know, in dialectics, when Hegel is talking about dialectics and idealism, Marx is talking about dialectics and dialectic materialism, eventually they say that, you know, there is a, for Hegel, when there is the absolute spirit getting freedom, when the Geist or the mind of God is getting absolute freedom, that is the end of history. Right? Then there's no, that is a synthesis, and then there's no other thesis. Same way, Marx is saying that once, you know, communism is the final thesis, a synthesis, and then there's no thesis after. When the society reaches the stage of communism, then there's the end of history. So Fukuyama has taken this concept of, he's still alive and he writes very interesting paradigms. So what happens is that he takes this idea of end of history from Hegel and Karl Marx, and then he writes this book, End of History and Last Man, very famous book in IR. And it is the juxtaposition or the domination of US supremacy. So not any kind of democracy, not the democracy in UK, not the democracy in other Western European countries, American liberal democracy is the end of history, and that is what you have to aspire to. Right? So this was the final stage of economics and of human governance. So he said, when he wrote this book, he said that, you know, Marx's idea of communism was wrong. It will never happen. The end of history has taken place, and the end of history is, you know, the American form of human governance and economics. Fukuyama is also very much criticized. A lot of Marxists, so understand that these 5 scholars I've given names of, so different Marxist scholars have also criticized their criticism, and this is an ongoing process. It keeps on going. It keeps on happening. So what I'm trying to tell you is that but if you are a student of IR, if you want to, study about Cold War, or was Cold War propaganda, or was it something which even Soviet Union believed in, but he will give you the American. For IR, End of History and The Last Man is a must-read book, which a lot of IR students read. Now we are coming to our understanding, that did we understand during the process, what are the basic loopholes, how did we understand it. So the first thing is that Marx didn't talk about the flexibility of capitalism. With every stage, you know with every inherent crisis of capitalism, be it in the 1930s depression or 2007-8, irrespective of the financial crisis that capitalism goes through, capitalism is very flexible. So the first critique that we can say is that Marxism was not able to predict the flexibility of capitalism. The second is taking the entire idea that all working class members can be capable of class consciousness, and believing that all working class people are good, believing in a goodness, that can't you have working class domination, can't you have dictators arise from working class context. Why having this entire idea that working class is all very utopian, and they're going to help, and they'll establish a egalitarian society, and they're going to live happily ever after, right? We know there's no happily ever after. So why with the working class? How can you? It's not a homogeneous group, right? The third is the oversimplification of the nature of society. So they have oversimplified the nature of the working class people also, an oversimplification of the nature of society, and claiming that influence of ideas, culture, and other aspects of what Marx called superstructure are just as important as the economic base to the cause of society. So to understand this, what basically they have oversimplified, like they have given too simple. They've given this paradigm that, okay, this is the base and this is the superstructure, and the base is economic realm, and the superstructure is ideology, family, your media, all of that. So there is this super very oversimplification. Like, for example, you can ask, where is geography in this? You understand? Or where is gender in this? Or where is the gender outside of the binary in this? So what I'm trying to say, that it was so much of oversimplification, making it very simple in its paradigm. The fourth context is, who came first? What came first? In this base and superstructure, what came first? So machine came first, or first did the man come first? Right? So Marxism will say that, okay, during the primitive communism, you have people, and so people came first, and then you had modes of production evolution, and then you had machines and factories. But then the question is the same chicken or egg question, that who came first. It's that so if men came first and humans came before communism, and then you had any kind of specialization and division of labor, shouldn't they be the base? Shouldn't they be the base? Shouldn't human civilization in general be the base, and economics be a part of superstructure, because it came late? Economics was not there initially. So it's just a paradigm that who came first, like it was the machine or the man. We have an answer of that, but then Marxism counteracts it. The fifth point is, various thinkers have argued that a communist state would be, by its very nature, eroding the rights of citizens due to the postulated violent revolution. So what happened is that with Stalin and the totalitarian state of Soviet Union, the entire idea of communism has become a nightmare, right? That it will be totalitarian. Like Chomsky does not believe in a state socialism, like socialism without the state. So what will that be, right? And there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of distrust towards communists, and this paranoia with communists. And the last point is, now this is very interesting. They talk about class, they never talk about race. Marxism never talks about race. So one of the philosophers said that there was a letter which was found out, because we know that Marx and Engels used to write a lot to each other. So there was a letter which was found out, in which Marx was telling Engels, or Engels was saying Marx, that look, uh, we have got the idea of the class conflict from the race conflict. You understand that the idea of two classes being in constant struggle, the bourgeois and the proletariat, was basically from the race paradigm of black and white. So that is our inspiration. But irrespective of that, the question of race was never dealt with. We are intuitively and very organically, in Black Lives Matter protest and in the other domains of protest, we have Marxism included in it. Like, you saw that how the term comrade was also used in anti-apartheid struggle and black right movement. But what basically the critique is that why was race not dealt with in how does class and race connect in the idea of Marxism? So because that is not connected well, so that is one of the problems. uh, so how do we studied it for so long, right? We studied for almost 1.5 2 months. We are studying with capitalism, then we studied the critique of capitalism, then we studied communism, and then eventually came to the critique of communism. So how do we look and think? So what is truth? So what I would like to end it with is that there's no absolute truth. A, everything is relative. B, the idea of looking at any kind of paradigm, capitalism or communism, or being, for example, when we thought about Adam Smith, we thought about the difference between self-interest and selfishness. We thought about the invisible hand. We understood how he had categorized division of labor, how he had talked about alienation. Then we talked about Ricardo and how Ricardo basically, how was he was anti-slavery and how he was having this kind of entire different kind of labor theory of value, but he was also someone who helped in the empowerment of so many other people. Then we had Hegel. Hegel gave you the entire idea of dialectics and Gaius, which is very confusing irrespective of studying it. But again, a very beautiful mind to study. Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, to a certain extent Lenin also, to a very large extent Foucault also. So what I'm trying to basically say is that what I basically think is that why we study something eventually when we're going to criticize it? So the answer to that is that you should go ahead and study it because it evolves your point of thinking. So when you're going to counteract any other thing, so for now when you look at any object, you will understand the entire history of this object. That not only the entire history of this being produced in the factory and coming to me, but entire the history of object and how man's relationship with things and man's relationship with himself or herself or themselves. Uh, what is that paradigm? When you look at your room, you're not going to see your room only as a room that you are staying in, but you'll also see it as a museum, which is one of the aspects of capitalistic modes of production. When you study about a thing, you will now the next time when you think that no, this is mine, the next time when you think that this is mine, you're going to think twice about it, and you'll understand that due to the of capitalism, there is so much of specialization that nothing is really yours, right? When you think about ownership, you're going to think about all the debates of ownership. That is it really good to own, or is the job or the thing or the object that you're thinking you own is owning you? The next time you're going to take a metro in a normal like time frame and going to take a ride, and you'll see so many people in the 9 to 5 jobs in Rajiv Chowk, Kashmiri Gate, you'll think about capitalism, right? When you will just be anti-state, when you will be just having a rhetoric of speaking against the state, when you're just criticizing the state, you'll also understand that you'll remember Foucault and you'll say that no, it's not only the state that has to be criticized because there are many other institutions of power. When you'll think about, the moment anyone calls your name and you look back, you will think about this concept of interpellation, right? That what is this? This is the conditioning. I've been conditioned to live with this name, this identity, right? Uh, the idea basically of doing this entire course was to make you think, as I told, and maybe ruin it. But you will never see things now just the way they are given. You're going to dig deeper. You're going to be critical. You're also going to embrace it. and understand that with every year as you grow up, you're going to have different kinds of thought. And the same thing, so for example, next year or after 2 years, if you go through the YouTube recording and try to understand it, I'll be speaking the same thing, right? But you will learn different things. You'll learn better things. So there's this evolution also which is there. You'll understand that how there's this concept of Geist. When you will have a problem with whether God exists or not, you are going to understand that you're not the only person who's going to have this problem. There are many people from many countries, from many societies who have had this problem. When you're going to think about alienation, when you start working, most of you are students. Few of you are also working, but most of you are students. There are a couple of students who are from medical science here. So what I'm trying to say that if there's alienation or exploitation in your own work field, in whatever, and you feel that whatever you're doing is not getting, you're not getting to see the result or whatever, so you're going to think about it and understand that alienation is not something which is personally happening only to you, and that will be a cure in itself. So the entire idea of the course has to make you is to make you think, and that is everything else. Yes, a genius is made of two things. A genius is made of, the first thing is that a genius knows when to stop, right? Which movie was that? Shah Rukh Khan's movie is in the whatever. So he tells, genius knows when to stop, right? So when, at what point, now that you have thought so much, you know where to stop, and you should have over your thought to make you stop also. That now I won't. This is enough, and I won't think beyond it, and I need to stop and do something else or think about something else. That is one thing. The second thing is also to have the capacity to critique your own idea. A genius is able to critique their own idea irrespective of, you know, and have the capacity to be fluid in their own thought process, right? So once you know that these are the ideas that we have studied and this is how you can critique them, you also have the understanding that no matter how good an idea is, no matter how many states have been formed out of it, how many people have died out of it, how many books have been written, every idea has the capacity to being criticized, right? But criticism is also art. You have to, it's an acquired taste, like drinking black coffee. So you have to train yourself to learn all of that. So I hope this entire process of these lectures, like 12-15 lectures, have helped. And now we're going to have the question answer round of it.